Hi, I'm Dr. Harry Lawson, the Chief Medical Officer for SIU Medicine, and today I'm joined by Dr. Christine Todd, the Department Chair of Medical Humanities and one of our leaders in the Center for Human and Organizational Potential. So welcome, Christine.
Nice to be here.
Great to have you, and we're going to talk a little bit about sort of the stressors going on with the COVID pandemic and maybe some specific recommendations around how to deal with those stressors. Let's start out with a term we hear a lot, and that's burnout. And what does burnout mean, and what does that entail?
I feel like burnout is something that we are all very familiar with, and it's a state of mental, physical, and spiritual exhaustion. So, sound familiar? The problem with burnout, although we all experience it, we experienced it before current times, we'll experience it on in the future, is if you can't kind of bounce back and you just get stuck there. That's when it can become very dysfunctional, interrupt your ability to work, interrupt your ability to relate to your family, take all the joy out of life, lead to things like depression. So it's okay to recognize that you're burnt out. And what I'm hoping is that by talking about burnout, we can give people some ideas of where they can look to start bouncing back, coming back, and maybe preventing from getting burnt out in the same way again.
You know, it's an interesting thing that you mentioned. Sometimes when you can't bounce back from all those stressors, it can enhance things like depression or even some other mental or behavioral health issues. And I think one of the interesting things that we often forget or don't talk about is that those things also have an impact on your chronic medical conditions.
Oh, yeah.
And so folks out there that are going through all of these stressors and the burnout that have long-term medical issues, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, you know, these other things that we've been talking about as also high risk factors for the COVID infection. Sometimes when you're burned out, you might not carry on with your normal medications, or you might not do the things that you had been doing prior. And so I think, you know, that's a really important point that you brought up, that can definitely impact your medical health. Are there strategies for the community out there, things that people can do to help reduce these stressors, help reduce or avoid burnout?
Yeah, I think one thing that's true about burnout, I mean, it literally means burned out. You don't have any more reserves left. And when that happens, especially people like the folks at SIU that are caregivers and caretakers, the last person we take care of is ourselves. So when we're down to running on fumes, we expend that taking care of other people, and then we fall behind on taking care of ourselves. But ironically, it is spending some time taking care of yourself, which can really help you either prevent burnout or come back from it. So mental exhaustion, is there a hobby, something you love to do, even taking a break, taking a walk, being outside, taking all the precautions but breathing some fresh air? Is there a way to physically come back? Is there a way to mentally come back by watching a movie that you love, or calling your friend on the phone and having some of that human relation that we can still have even though we're all socially distancing? Spiritually, how do you come back? And that's different from everybody, but I think most people know what is kind of the medication that helps them come back from being depleted. And taking some time to do that when you realize you're burnt out is the first step at being able to then turn around, have some reserves, and start helping others again. So I actually like to make a list of some of the things that I feel like really help me come back. So one of my favorite comedy shows to watch is Monty Python's Flying Circus, and that's available on Netflix, thank goodness. I know if I watch an episode of that, I will sort of have my sense of humor restored, which is one of the ways I deal with stress. And so when my sense of humor is gone, I know I'm burnt out. And watching an episode of that really helps me. But I can't think of that when I'm totally depleted. I just think everything is terrible and I don't know, I'm done. And so then I go to my list of all the things that help me come back, and I'm like, oh, I could do that right now. So that can help. And so when you're doing something you love, write it down, make a list. I think that really can help you regenerate.
You know, you brought up an interesting thing too about you know, the new world of being at home and social distancing. And I know that a lot of folks are dealing with isolation or feelings of isolation. And you know, I think a lot of us, you know, I'm thinking about the things that the group of friends I have that are living in different areas of our region that I haven't been able to see. You know, we've done obviously the online meetings through whatever platform works. Some people have access to that, some don't. I've also come to know my neighbors a lot better by just talking across the street, which has been an interesting sort of event for me. I also think maybe having some discussions or able to sort of talk through stressful situations with other coworkers and other people in your same situation seems to be helpful too. Have you seen or have you talked about any of those kind of things, or support groups, or just your own sort of network of friends and colleagues that maybe can relate to the things that you're going through on a daily basis?
You know, physicians and other health caregivers tend to be pretty isolated to begin with. That's a problem that leads to burnout no matter how stressful the time is. And there are HIPAA and privacy issues. We don't want to just blab things all over the place. But there's also a lot of shame and guilt that goes along with something that didn't go right. And so physicians, nurses, social workers tend to like keep all that stuff in. And that of course can lead to burnout and depression and all kinds of bad things. So having a venue where you can talk to someone in a space where you trust that they won't say, oh, you must be incompetent if that happened to you, or I've never had that problem, but will be more sympathetic, not change the subject, not bury it on the rug, but say, yep, we've all been there, tell me more. Finding those venues and cultivating those venues are really important. So we've started some Valent group training, which is a way for caretakers to do that. And so we're hoping to start some of those groups. We've trained some leaders here at SIU. But I think, you know, it's your medical school classmates, it's people who do work like you but don't work with you, so there's not the sort of talking about a case element. Folks in your family who are far enough removed from you that it doesn't injure your relationship to talk about those kinds of things. I find especially old school classmates, they know me, they know my intent, but they don't work right here in Springfield, so I can talk to them. And calling them on the phone or doing a Zoom meeting with them has been really helpful. So I encourage people to investigate those kinds of relationships as safe spaces to talk about the stuff you've got to talk about.
Yeah, and I think you can modify and tweak that for, you know, we many times focus on the population, our colleagues in the front line taking care of patients, but you know, anybody in the community, you have that group of folks that you can really trust and work with. And so yeah, it's a great method of overcoming some of that feeling of isolation. You know, another thing that's kind of new and very stressful for a lot of people is the idea that a lot of us are working from home. There are a lot of people who are used to being in an office and around a group of people, and now they're at home trying to do their job, and that's a whole sort of new set of challenges. And so what kind of recommendations might you have for those stresses?
To me, one of the first things is to admit that nobody has the right answer for this. You know, nobody living today has lived through something similar to this and just says, well, here is the tried and true way to do that. We're all in unknown territory, which I think is one of the frightening things about it. People can act like they know how to do it, but you know, P.S., nobody really knows how to do it. So we've each got to figure it out for ourselves and share what works. I don't think working from home looks the same for any one of us, even though working at work does kind of look the same. If you have kids who are school-age kids, then you've got to be transitioning from doing some homeschooling to doing some, like, you know, disaster mitigation and conflict resolution, all in between working. If you've got other stuff going on at home, pets to take care of, things that are going on at home, because of course real life, like a leaking roof and a car that breaks down, those things are still happening to all of us. So some people are morning people, sometimes some people are afternoon people. So I feel like this works differently, and that we should give ourselves permission to work this the way it works for us. So when I've been doing Town Hall and Wellness Wednesday, which I love connecting with the community when I can't see people at work, I've heard a couple different strategies. One is to utilize early morning and late at night times when your kids are in bed doing online stuff, etc., as sort of the quiet time where you can do some of that work, where you need some quiet, protected time to get something done. So this might mean that in the middle of the day, take a nap because you're waking up really early or you're going to bed late, but that's okay. Some folks are setting a timer and saying, okay, 30 minutes of work, 15 minutes of project, something else, then 30 minutes and 15 minutes, and just kind of breaking up their day into segments so that they can kind of in parallel be accomplishing two things at once. I never like to say in healthcare that we should reduce our standards, but we need to be more flexible about how we're going to accomplish what we're going to accomplish.
100%. Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying. We're really looking at that now. We're looking at, in our environment, how do we re-engage? How do we start increasing the volume of individuals who we're going to be seeing in our clinics, and how do we adjust to a new world where a lot of our folks may maintain a presence at home as opposed to being in the office?
Yeah.
And how do we rotate or alternate schedules? And all those things have to be looked at. And there's a lot of unknowns, so that's a stressor. People are not only dealing with a brand new situation, but it changes so rapidly, it's hard to really understand what we're facing in a month.
Right.
Right. Are any other tips? I know you went through several there for folks at home. Anything else do you think would be important for individuals who are working from home now?
I think one thing to think about is how you spend your day at work. So I have a look on my little iPhone and see how many steps I took a day. And in a typical day when I was working here on campus, I would take X many steps. And I realized when I started working from home, I was taking 200 steps a day. And I thought, work does not mean sit in front of your laptop from the moment you get up until the moment you go to sleep and respond immediately to everybody's email and every fire that comes up. In your actual workday, when you're at work, I somehow have found the time to walk all this distance and do all these other things and be at meetings and not look at my phone. So I need to let myself duplicate that in what's going on at home and get some exercise, have time away from the computer. Work does not mean staring at my laptop, and I think it's gotten defined that way.
Yeah.
That makes us feel safe, like we're monitoring what's going on, but it's really adverse to our health. So breaking that up, I think, is a good tip.
You know, and something else that I've heard from others, and I've actually seen it too, is that when you're working from home, it's real easy to leak over into what would normally have been home time.
Home time.
You left work, you went home, but it's right there and it's staring at you and you're kind of still dealing with it. And you know, probably the tip is, well, turn it off when it's time to stop work. But it's definitely one of those other issues that's been coming up.
Having a stop work time, having a schedule that incorporates work and also family stuff, chore stuff, other stuff, and say, this is my schedule for today, so I'm going to stick to this and I don't have to respond to everything right away.
Okay. Well, I think we really covered some of the key topics that we wanted to make sure we addressed today. Are there any other additional things or a couple of key things that you would want to get out or communicate to the to the audience?
Sure, absolutely. I think that when you are isolated, it becomes really easy to be very self-critical and think, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough. SIU is accomplishing a ton, and it's accomplishing a ton because we are all working really well together. And so I would say having that confidence that we are making progress and we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing is really important. I would also really encourage people to take as many chances as they can to connect, to the people they see at work, whether it's over a WebEx or a Zoom, tuning into a town hall, tuning into one of Dr. Cruz's talks. Don't isolate all day long. Reach out and talk to people, even if it's just a chit chat. How was your weekend, etc. We do that at work. That's part of work.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Dr. Christine Todd, thanks for joining us today. And thank you to our audience for watching this video. And as always, stay well, stay apart, and wash your hands.